All right, hello and welcome everyone to the Edge of the Earth podcast. Today, I have a very special guest. We're talking to Rebecca Genesis, who is the author of Ghost Seer.
Yeah, it's kind of a long subtitle there. So it's Ghost Seer, True, Scary, and Mysterious Stories from My Strange and Paranormal Life.
Cool, and thank you so much for taking the time to be on our show today. Could you tell people a little bit more about your book and where they can find a copy if they'd like to purchase it?
Sure. Right now it's only available through Amazon, so it's a Kindle format if you want the ebook. Right now it's priced at $2.99. If you want the paperback, it's like $9.99, but I've seen some other offers on there for, less plus shipping, depending on which one you choose. But yeah, just go to Amazon.com and go into either Kindle or just type Ghost Seer into the search bar there, and it should pop right up.
Awesome. And like we were talking about before, I've started reading the book, and it's extremely well written. I mean, it's a pleasure to read so far, and I'm really enjoying it. So I highly recommend everyone go out and pick this book up. So let's just jump right into what got you into the paranormal in the first place. I mean, if you read the book, it sounds like you've had experiences from a very young age.
I have, absolutely. I've always been drawn to the paranormal. I don't know if it's because I was born on Halloween or if that's just a strange coincidence. But I've definitely always been pulled to things like Ouija boards, tarot, anything with channeling, life after death. I've wanted to know. I guess I'm just mostly very curious. So, my curiosity continues, and I've, found answers to some of these questions that, kind of were born inside of me when I was young, but I still have many, many more questions, so that's kind of what I'm doing, as a lot of paranormal investigators and researchers just want to find, the answers to some of these mysteries.
Yeah, I think that's the same for me. Is just the curiosity that almost seemed kind of natural in me to begin with. I mean, I never had any big experience that led me into it, but you have a story in your book. Chapter 1 is actually called The Foretelling, and it sounds like you were considered a miracle baby right off the bat. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, my brother was the miracle baby. I was actually called a special child before my mom even knew that she was pregnant with me. My dad was going through some, alcoholic issues, and they heard about this preacher, healer guy down in the Tampa Bay area, and this would have been in the late 70s. And my brother had just been born. He was born in 78. And so he was about a year old, and my mom and dad and, baby brother, they go in there and they kind of check it out, and they're a little, they're not sure about it because it was like a Pentecostal kind of thing. And, they weren't used to that kind of scene at all. Tongues and all that, speaking in tongues and whatnot.
Yeah.
So they almost left, but, they decided to go ahead and, get into the back of the line when he called everyone up for the healing. And they were the very last ones, kind of reluctantly make their way up there. And where the preacher guy was making a show with everyone else, he actually kind of tucked the microphone underneath his arm when my mom and dad and baby brother walked up there. And he had like a quieter moment with them and kind of, told my mom, your son's a miracle baby. The child that you carry in your womb is special as well. She just figured that maybe, hey, I look a little chubby from having, my son. But she actually found out a couple weeks later that she was pregnant with me at the time of the healing. And so that was a pretty cool moment. And my brother, he was a miracle child because he was born with the tube wrapped around his neck very tightly. So, he was a blue baby, and he could have had some really serious health repercussions, but he didn't. So still to this day, he's healthy as can be.
Yeah, that's really crazy. And also, I kind of wanted to ask you, I don't know if you're very religious or not, but did you believe this preacher actually had some sort of ability, or he just happened to be right at the time?
Mm-hmm. I think healers come from all different walks of life. I believe that, anyone that really has that calling, no matter if they're, Pentecostal or if they're Native American or, who knows, shaman, whatever. I think that people do have healing abilities, and my dad definitely, he stayed off the alcohol for years and years. It wasn't until he was much older that he actually picked up the bottle again, and luckily he's put it back down for good. But yeah, I think he definitely had a positive effect on my dad for sure. Definitely helped him heal.
That's awesome, because you hear about so many fakes that are out there, people thumping each other in the head and then they fall down or whatever, and it's such a big show.
Yeah,
but then when you have
kind of a spectacle thing, but yeah, I'm not into all that.
No, and exactly. It's kind of like I always say with crop circles, it only takes one real one to be, legitimize almost, to say that it actually exists. And the same thing with the healers. I mean, if one person can actually do it, then, it's possible. So, I mean, anybody, well, I wouldn't say anybody could do it, but that actually leads me to something else later on. So the next chapter actually covers a Ouija board experience, and this is really personal for me. I've never actually used one, but I've always been extremely curious, and you always hear about negative experiences, like demons and all this kind of stuff. But it sounds like you had a pretty good experience.
Yes, the first time. As you get further in the book, you kind of see why I no longer play with them. But yeah,
okay.
the first time, it evolves. The story changes. But yeah, the first time, my first experience was actually really cool. It was my first time, using Ouija board. I guess you could say it was my first paranormal experience. Just hanging out. It was summertime, and we were off of school, me and my brother and this neighborhood kid, and the kid's like, "Oh, I got a Ouija board." I'm like, "What? Bring it over." So he brought it over, and we're playing with it. And at first, I'm kind of skeptical, and I still am. I've had a lot of experiences, but I look at everything with a very critical eye to kind of determine what's paranormal and what's not. And it's just kind of how I've been from a young age. So I noticed it was moving on its own. And so, okay, we determined, okay, we're not gonna cheat, we're not gonna make it move, we want to see if this really works. And it did move. So, the only person that I knew to call upon, the only dead person I had in my life at that point was my great-grandpa. And he just died 3 years earlier. So that's the one that we called for, and it seems like he came through, he spelled out my name, and, we were talking for a little bit, and then, we kind of closed up the session, and I asked him if he wanted to speak to my mom when she got home from work. And he said yes. So when she got home from work a few hours later, my mom's like, "Oh, okay, I'll humor you. We'll play it."
Yeah.
But she's just kind of got this smirk on her face the whole time looking at me like I'm moving it. I was not moving the planchette. So once again, I call up great-grandpa, who was her grandfather. And so, he comes through, and I asked, do you know who's here with me? And he wrote yes, and then he went to spell out my mom's name, which started with an M, but instead of spelling out Melissa, he spelled out Marty, M-A-R-T-Y. So I was confused, and I was even more confused because I look up at my mom, and she's just like, her face is frozen, she starts to cry, she gets really overwhelmed, and I wasn't sure what was going on. So basically after my mom, was able to get her emotions together and speak, we found out, that's how me and my brother found out that my mom had a different name from birth. She was born Martha Alice. And she went through the whole hippie thing and wanted to change her name to Melissa Ann. But she did that before we were born. So we never knew. We never heard anyone call her Martha or Marty, except when that Ouija board session happened and my great-grandpa came through. So that was, I just got chills. That was a pretty crazy experience, yeah.
Yeah, when I read that blew my mind. I mean, that's something that, really makes you wonder, because there's no way that anyone else could have known that. So, I don't know.
And people have asked, do you really think it was your great-grandpa? It could have been a demon in disguise. And, who knows? I mean, they say that when you use the Ouija board the first time, they want to befriend you. And then after that, it gets kind of scary. So I don't know if it was really great-grandpa or not, but I know the information that came through was valid regardless. So I got hooked. I got hooked on Ouija after that, that's for sure.
And it must have been for, how many years do you think that you used it before you finally stopped?
On and off. Well, let's see. I used it from the age of, I'd say, a little bit between 8 and 12. And I was doing, like, homemade Ouija boards, too. But then I stopped. Yeah, I had a bad experience. I want to say I was 12. And after that, I stopped for quite a while. And then my first husband, he got me a Ouija board for my birthday one year, and I just kind of put it away and didn't even touch it till years later, which I fully regret because that chapter, that's a crazy one. You'll read that eventually as you get further along in the book. But that was the last time I played with the Ouija, and it was one of the scariest experiences I've ever had in my entire life. So I still have the Ouija board. I haven't gotten rid of it, but I do not play with it, that's for sure.
Okay, so you didn't go through the whole process of, like, supposedly burning the Ouija board and closing the portal and all that stuff?
No, and there's so much information out there about how you're, oh, you can't do this, don't ever burn it, that's just going to release, whatever, demons, or, you got to put it underwater, who knows? I'm just going to hold on to the darn thing and, I don't know, maybe have a cool collection of creepy stuff eventually, you know what I mean? So.
Right, yeah, as long as it's not bothering you, I mean. And so I think that story will leave in the book for readers to purchase it and find out for themselves. I do want to talk to you about the next part of it. That this is about as far as I've read so far, and this one is about a cursed house. And so I want to ask you about this one. It seems to deal with more of a malevolent type entity, and then from that we'll kind of branch out and talk about if you've done any ghost hunting yourself, and if you've experienced malevolent entities out in the field somewhere. So tell us about this story with this house that you lived in.
Okay, so this was back in the mid-'80s. I was about 8 years old, and my aunt and uncle, they bought a nice house by the Hillsborough River over in Tampa Bay. Their family was growing, so they needed, a bigger home to accommodate them. Now, the weird twist in the beginning is that they didn't want this house. They wanted a different house, a beautiful Spanish-style home on the other side of the river. But I guess it was wrapped up in some divorce battle, and this, angry ex-husband burned the thing down. So they picked their second choice. And this house was being sold kind of under, duress, I think is what it's called, when, at a lower price. And so there was a whole backstory that I learned about it later. But, I didn't know this at first. But from the first day that we were moving them in, my little baby cousin, who was only 3 at the time, she fell out the second-story window. And so we just figured, okay, she was leaning on the screen, whatever. She was okay. She landed in the bushes. She didn't have to go to the hospital. But then after that, more events started happening, more tragedies. Like the animals were dying off. And my aunt is a huge animal lover. Like she's always had dogs and cats. And one by one, they're just, either running away or getting out and getting ran over, or they were dying of quote-unquote natural causes. So there were other things that were happening. Plus, I was starting to feel a presence. This was when I first started really, really feeling things as a child, and I wasn't sure what they were. But I was definitely sensing something unseen that definitely had bad intentions for the family and me and my brother, who would be there all the time after school and summers. And it was a beautiful house. It was really ironic. And then my cousin, the one who fell out the window, she almost drowned one day in the pool. There was a day when my uncle was walking down the stairs and he fell. He was holding my other cousin. Luckily, my cousin was okay, but my uncle's knee got really messed up. Shortly thereafter, my older cousin, the one who fell out the window, as she got a little bit older, she was playing around in her mom's playroom, it was like an office playroom, and she looks underneath the windowsill, and she sees a carving, and it says, "This may be your house, but it will always be your home." Now, that ties into the story of the couple that had the house built, and why they sold it under duress was because they ran out of money. They spent so much on making it, their perfect dream home that they weren't even able to afford it. So they had to sell it very reluctantly. So I think they were putting a lot of negative emotions towards the family that ended up with their dream home, and it manifested into something very dark. So, we kind of put it together, and my aunt eventually had the place blessed by a Catholic priest. So I think that helped out a little bit, and they were able to finally sell it. But that was an experience that, it was crazy, because I'd always feel this thing, especially in the pool and up and down the stairs, and that's where a couple of the incidents had happened. So kind of glad that that house isn't part of the family anymore, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I can understand that. So basically it was negative intent from the people who had built it. So was it that they had passed away and you think it was their spirits, or were they still alive and something else was happening?
No, they were still alive. It was definitely I would say something like an evil eye, like somebody, kind of hexing you in a way, creating a curse, creating a negative situation on the people that they were jealous of. And I believe anyone can do this, not just like a witch or, some shaman or, voodoo person. Anyone can do that with their thoughts. And we do stuff like this all the time without even knowing it. So I feel as if they had put something on that family that created some sort of darkness, so, who knows how these things actually work behind the scenes? This is what I want to know. How does stuff like this work,
Yeah. So do you feel, you've had enough experiences to write an entire book. So do you feel like you personally are kind of would you say naturally inclined to experience this kind of thing?
Mm-hmm. I would say for sure. I'm not sure why. Yeah. It's just my path in life. I think I was meant to just kind of delve into this whole, the paranormal and the unexplained and mysteries. It's what has intrigued me the most. And it's funny because my son, he was also born on my birthday on Halloween, on my 19th birthday. Yes, and he's going to be 18 on his next birthday, and my daughter, she's going to be 12 next month, and they're both into the paranormal. I'm sure that's my doing, but they love it just as much as me. So, you know, we do go ghost hunting together and stuff, and, you know, really enjoy it. It's really fun.
Wow, that's cool.
So,
when you do go ghost hunting, who do you go with? Or normally, like, how big is your team? You said your children, obviously.
Yeah, you know, it's just like me and my kids, you know, and then if they can't go because they have school or whatever, you know, or they're with their dad, then I'll just go off on my own. And I was able to do a really cool road trip without them, but I was able to go through Tombstone, Arizona. I went to San Antonio, the Alamo. Wasn't able to go ghost hunting there or anything, but I was able to check it out. That's where 1,600 people died, like in one day or something like that in this battle. Then I went to New Orleans and checked that out. And so, you know, I try to, you know, squeeze in ghost hunting whenever I can. So that was actually like a road trip. I just kind of was like, hey, let's do some ghost hunting too. But me and the kids, we've been out to Virginia City, Nevada. That's actually where the Ghost Adventures crew got their start, in the old Washoe Club. That's where they captured that full-body apparition.
Yeah, wow. Did you have anything happen there while you were hunting?
It was like a ghost tour. So we went through during the day. You have to pay like $400 to stay overnight, which I would love to do one of these days. Yeah, it's, you know, it's worth it for the people that want to do it. But I just did, you know, me and the kids did a ghost tour, and I was the first one that noticed little orbs were flying by and trying to capture them on my camera phone. And then I'm getting everyone else to get, you know, they're like, oh, we got to take pictures too. And we didn't really have any experiences until we got down to the crypt. That was when my son captured a really cool green orb. He got 4 consecutive photos of this orb. I've never seen a green orb like this. So that's on our website, actually, at ghostseers.com. You can check out the gallery and see that green orb that you got pictures of moving around. So really
Very
nice.
Cool. Mm-hmm. Okay. So do you normally investigate public areas, or do you go into private homes very often, or how does that work?
Yeah, you know, we just kind of started. We decided to make it official last summer in Virginia City. So we're kind of new to the whole thing, and I haven't done anyone's home or anything like that yet. I've checked out, actually, I saw a ghost at the local bar right down the street. That was the last place that I kind of did a little impromptu investigation there. It's definitely very haunted. There was a regular that died last year from cancer, and he was the one that I saw. He walked through a wall with his poster on it, and he's wearing like the identical clothes as he was wearing in the poster. I found out that a man died on the pool table of a heart attack a few years ago, and there was a bartender that she died from drug overdose like a year or two ago. So that place is very haunted, and I've gotten some pretty cool evidence there on photo and video.
Wow. So it seems like when people pass away, even if they don't happen to die in that one location, like maybe they frequent this bar all the time, but then they died at home, maybe their spirit is naturally attracted to go back to this bar and haunt that place, you know, rather than their own home. Does that seem to be the case with a lot of times? Yeah,
and Eddie, that's the name of the guy, Eddie. That was the ghost I saw walk through the wall. He's got a lot of friends that still go to that bar, and I didn't know him in life, but you know, my brother, he actually goes there much more than me, and Eddie followed him home the other night, which was interesting, because I was out back listening to music, and my brother comes out, and he's like, Becky, someone just said hey to me in the living room, and there's no one there. I was like, male or female? He's like, it was very whispery. I was like, all right, let me get out my dowsing rods. I'm going to find out who it is. So just through asking yes or no, it took me a minute, because I was like, are you friends? No. Are you family? No. Are you friend of a friend? And then it went to yes, and then it just hit me. I'm like, are you Eddie? And it went to yes. I was like, well, listen, let me channel you tomorrow. You know, so I did a little channeling session the next day, and he just wanted to say what's up, really. You know, there was no ghostly warning or anything like that. He just wants to be acknowledged and for people to know that he's still around. And I did ask him, so can ghosts drink? He said ghosts can drink. So, hey.
Wow. I've never heard that one before. That's a good question, actually. Maybe that's why he still goes to the bar. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
So, how many times have you had them follow you home?
Oh gosh, probably all the time, but that was the first one that made himself known. And then, you know, I've definitely had experiences with being kind of like spirit attachment, you might want to say. There was you'll read this story as you get further along. There was a ex-boyfriend I had to leave the state from because he got very dangerous, obsessive. It was
Oh,
scary,
wow.
so I had to
Yeah.
leave this state, and I had to escape him from in the middle of the night and actually take off on a plane and go stay with my mom for a while.
Oh, my gosh.
He still continued to harass me. It was about a year and a half after I left this state for California that I found out that he was killed, unfortunately. Not happy about that, but I
Right.
was relieved that I could come back. Well, it wasn't
Yeah.
the end of him, and this kind of ties into the last time I played the Ouija board. I knew that he was around. I could sense him, and I was having dreams about him. He was definitely letting me know that I was having dreams that he was in my house, and I was trying to push him out as hard as I could, and he's laughing at me and telling me he's not going to leave. So I was feeling really creeped out. I decided to do the Ouija board session on Valentine's Day of all days, 2014. And, oh gosh, that was just a crazy experience. That was the most frightened I've been in a long time because the planchette started going back and forth very quickly, like people describe with the Zozo phenomenon, except this was my ex-boyfriend. And then immediately after, I got so scared, I threw the planchette off, and I was like, nope, no more. That was the last time I ever touched the Ouija board. I put it away. But then that night, my second husband, who I'd met out in California while I was out there, and he came back to live with me in Florida, he brought me this Mylar balloon that said Happy Valentine's Day. And so, I give him a hug, and I have to tell him, I have to confess, I played the Ouija while you weren't home, and he was very upset because he's Native American. He believes very strongly in the spirit world and demons and things like that. And he also knew how dangerous my ex-boyfriend was and that I felt like he was kind of stalking me after death and stuff. So he told me I was pretty dumb for doing that, and I agreed. Well, that night, I woke up in the middle of the night, and for no apparent reason, just scared. And my room was pitch black, and I knew that balloon was floating. It was floating in the ceiling. But I just knew in my heart that if something had happened to that balloon, it was him, it was the ex, and there was no doubt about it. So I was so scared, I did not get up to turn on the light. I just tried to go back to sleep as much as I could, really. Finally, the next morning came, the sun came up. First thought, look at the balloon. I look up at the ceiling where it was not there. I looked down on the ground. I couldn't believe it. I get out of bed, I look at it, and it looks like it had been slashed with a knife. My heart dropped. Woke up my husband, I'm like, oh my gosh, the balloon, and I knew it, and I told him, what happened overnight, my premonition about if something had happened to it, it was him. And that was just the beginning. Stuff started happening in the house, lights turning on and off in the room where I did the Ouija session, constant tapping on the bookshelf where I had the Ouija board, tapping on the window, and then it kind of elevated to where this washing machine that we had at the time was turning on and on by itself. It was like a digital washing machine, so it would make this noise like do-do-do-do when it would turn on, and then when it would turn off, it would go do-do-do. So I was hearing constantly do-do-do, 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 and I knew it was him just trying to drive me crazy. Because we started ignoring the tapping and whatever, we didn't care about that. So he upped the game. So after that, we decided to move. We actually moved out a couple weeks after that. Nothing happened in the house after that, but one of the final chapters, the house that we lived in after that, that was where I had a shadow person haunting. So it just continues.
So that gives me so many questions, but for starters, like when a ghost follows you home, and say that it's somebody you didn't know, maybe you were doing an investigation and it just happened to follow you home, does it just linger there for a while and leave on its own, or do you do some sort of special little ritual type thing to cleanse the house?
Yeah, because of what I kind of do, and, I channel, so that means, I communicate, with the dead, and I'm open to that. As long as you're not a harmful spirit, you're welcome. But okay. I burn sage regularly to keep away anything that has harmful intent. I think it's very important, to do protection kind of rituals, surround yourself with a white light, love and light, and bless your home often. Because if not, especially when, what I'm doing, the kind of stuff that I do, you can invite in, some darkness and whatnot. So you do have to definitely take measures. Now, I do still see, like, a shadow I don't know if it's shadow people or if it's one or more, but I definitely see a figure, but it does not come in my yard or the house. It darts around like in the neighbor's backyard. So I feel like there's this like perimeter that I have created that anything harmful or negative cannot cross. At least I hope so.
Huh. That's really interesting. Yeah. So you just like you see it outside in the neighborhood?
Yeah. Especially like as the sun's setting or after dark. See it, especially in my peripheral, little darting thing, and it's not just like a branch moving or something like that, because I can see like a hand move or I see like a head, and they always dart away whenever you look at them. They always dart away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're sneaky peepers.
Yeah, and that's exactly what they seem to do is they just look at you. I mean, I've never heard of them like actually interacting. I investigated one house, and I told this on an earlier podcast, but they claimed that they were being harassed by shadow people and that they were being physically harmed by shadow people, and that just didn't really fit the mold for anything that I knew about shadow people. And so I think it was a dark mass that they were seeing, but it wasn't a shadow person. It was maybe something else that just happened to be malevolent, and they were mistaken because they didn't see a hat or anything like that. I mean, granted, shadow people come in many shapes and forms, it seems like, but I don't think it was your typical shadow person because, like you said, they just move around and they just look at you for some reason.
What I do, I think some are different than others, to be honest, because from what I understand, there are children shadow people, so it's not just like, adults or humanoid form. Some of them are just like black blobs. But I have heard stories, and plus my one experience that I had with the shadow person haunting that in the last house that I lived at, it was definitely trying to stir up fear, and I think there's some of them that really do want to feed off fear and negativity. I don't know if they want to cause harm, but for some reason I think that empowers them, gives them energy. So I wouldn't trust all shadow people, that's for sure, but this is something that I want to learn more about, so I think some of them, maybe they do need help crossing into the light. They're stuck here, they're earthbound, and maybe, they just don't know how to cross over. So if that's something I could help with, I would definitely do that. But if they just want to feed off fear and create negative situations, then maybe it's better if I try to stay away from them, so I'm not sure.
So then maybe if we're saying that, like, let's take, for example, shadow people, they could be someone or something that hasn't crossed over to the light. So then what would that make regular ghosts? Would they have crossed over already and then just kind of come back to visit, or what do you think that would be?
Okay, so the way I've heard people explain it, that really makes sense to me. Ghosts never crossed over into the light. They are completely earthbound. Spirits, on the other hand, they have crossed over and they can come back. So I have a friend of mine, Michael. He died. I actually write about him quite a bit in the book. He died about 9 years ago, and he's the one that is like my go-to guy. He's like my spirit guide. So whenever I do channeling, with my crystal, he's the one that whenever I want to speak with someone, can you get this person for me? And he gets the person, on the line, so to speak.
Wow.
So, yeah, and he's awesome because he's he's always been such a great protective friend, and it's awesome to know that he still protects me on the other side. So that's another reason I feel, somewhat safe and protected, is because I know he's got my back for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So we're coming at the end of the podcast here. One last thing I want to ask you about really quickly. Going back to the shadow people, you said there were children versions. Could you describe what those look like? And have you ever heard of the Blackeyed children?
Yes. Oh, my gosh, the Blackeyed children, you brought them up.
I'm wondering if there could be a correlation there.
Yeah, I've never seen a shadow child myself, but there was a documentary. It was called Children of the Grave, and this guy documented it was all these poor little kids that had been at an orphanage from a long time ago, and there was like this mass grave, and next to this old orphanage was like a bunch of shadow children in the woods, and there's this really creepy picture online. If you Google Children of the Grave documentary, it was actually an award-winning documentary. I haven't watched it yet, but I saw the previews. Previews were really scary. Black-eyed children, this is something completely different. I actually did some research on them, and that was going to be the last blog that I did, but I kind of stopped because I got a little creeped out on the subject, actually. The Black-eyed kids are these kids that show up to your door, or like they approach you while you're in your car, like in a parking lot, and they always look for an invitation in. They want to be invited in. They don't look at you at first, and they usually travel in pairs, and they have like drab clothing. Sometimes they even stink. But basically, it seems like they have these pre-recorded lines that they say, and if you try to say, like, ask them a question, they, like, kind of go back to, like, saying, well, it'll just take a minute. It seems like their speech is limited as far as, like, the things that they say. But there's this dreadful fear that overcomes people, and then once they see their eyes, then it's just like, oh my gosh, most people, it's like fight or flight, they get the heck out of there, or they slam the door in their face, and so I kind of wondered, like, what happens if you do let a black-eyed kid in? And there was one story that I found where this couple let the black-eyed kids in, and now the dad, the husband, he has, like, melanoma. They were getting bloody noses, headaches. They think they're dying. So don't let the black-eyed children in, ever. And the theory behind that is that they're probably some sort of alien correlation, but I'm not sure, and I'm kind of staying away from that subject for now because it really creeped me out.
Yeah, I just have to say a couple things here, because the way that, the fact that you said that it's exactly what I've always heard. And so when we say black-eyed children, we mean completely black-eyed, no white in the eyes at all. And then you were talking,
is completely black. The iris, everything is completely blacked out. Technically, they should not be able to see.
Right, you would think, yeah. And then you were saying, like, when they speak, it sounds like pre-recorded messages. I've heard them saying, like, well, not personally, but I've heard of them saying weird things like, is it food time? Like they don't quite have a perfect grasp on the English language. Have you heard of that too?
Yeah, that they say things that are just kind of strange, or, can we use your phone, or, my parents will be here any time. That was actually what happened when the husband and the wife that I just told you about, they said that those kids left, and then they got in this black car with these tall black men. And of course, it makes me think of Men in Black type things. But just a very, scary situation. And, the theories about that, the alien kind of thing, but it seems like their main goal is to scare you. Again, I don't know if it's like a, take your energy, we're going to, the movie Monsters, Inc., how the monsters go and scare little kids and collect their fear, and it, like, powers everything. Is there something going on like that? I don't know. You know what I mean?
It's very possible.
Mm-hmm. There may be creatures out there that like to feed on our fear, which is kind of scary.
Yeah. And like you said, when people do let them in, I know of David Weatherly, who has maybe one or two books on the black-eyed kids, and I haven't read them yet. I would really like to, but yeah. And so you were saying, like, the couple let them in and got sick. Well, one story that I had heard from Mr. Weatherly was about this woman. She had gone to the supermarket and she had her kid in the back seat, and she had went in just for a second and left him in the back seat by himself, which is probably not the greatest thing to do in the world. But so apparently a black-eyed child had come up and asked the boy if he could sit in the back seat with him, and the boy, just being an innocent child, let him in. And the mom came out, and she freaked out, obviously, because there was a kid with black eyes sitting in the back seat with her son. And so she, like, I think the kid was kicked out or something. Like, the mother asked the kid to leave. And so the kid left, and then she was so freaked out, she, like, called her husband to come pick her up and all that stuff. And it turns out her son ended up getting extremely sick for about an entire year, like over the course of an entire year, and the symptoms just kept changing. Like, the doctors couldn't figure out what it was. It would go from one thing to the other, and they never found any, way to cure it or nail it down to any specific illness. And he's totally fine now, but at the time, he got extremely ill, and that's exactly what you were saying with the couple with the melanoma.
Oh, that's good that he's okay. Yeah, I'm actually familiar with that story. And David Weatherly, he's a Facebook buddy of mine, and we're not real friends in real life, but in Facebook land. But yeah, he's a really cool researcher and, explorer into the paranormal realm. And I've definitely listened to a couple of his podcasts on the black-eyed children for the research I was doing.
Nice.
Yeah, really cool guy. So yeah, his book is called The Black-Eyed Children, and that's one I want to check out too, for sure.
Awesome. So just in closing here, I'm going to ask you a question, but I think I already know the answer. But have you experienced enough to say 100% that there is life after death?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely.
So no doubt in your mind.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt in my mind whatsoever. No doubt. Yeah, and I believe orbs are real. Orbs are real, people.
Yes, they're not just dust speckles or whatever.
Yes.
Not every time, but... Yeah, so again, thanks for coming on, and if you want to tell everyone one last time the name of your book, how to get it, and how to get it in contact with you if they would like to.
Sure. So the name of the book is Ghost Seer. It's true, scary, and mysterious stories from my strange and paranormal life. You can get it on Amazon. If you want, you can also just go on my website, which is ghostseers.com. There's a link there that'll take you to the Amazon site. You can check out my blog while you're there and my video gallery, my photo gallery. So we're kind of new, but we're going to be adding a bunch more content and really building the site up and doing a bunch more investigations. So getting it really off the ground here shortly for 2016.
All right. Thanks a lot, and we'll have you on soon. I would like to talk more about this stuff if you're willing. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to. It was a fun
All right. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome, Jeff. You have a great day.
All right. You too.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
And that's going to do it for this week's episode. Thanks again to Rebecca Genesis for being on the podcast. Find her at ghostseers.com. Find me at jeffjarman.ml. Also check out our friends at the Fright Corner podcast. It's a horror movie review podcast that is hosted by John, who has been a guest on this show several times now. So, yeah, all the links will be in the description below, and we'll see you right here next week at the edge of the earth.